along the way, our relationship started to have some cracks in it. We started to kind of break down. And at one point, we went to coffee, and she said, I need to tell you something, but I can't be your friend anymore, which was really shocking. And I said, you can't be my friend anymore, like right now, or is this like later, like in a month? Like what? And she said, I don't know. I'm not sure when I'll be able to be friends.
You felt this was a faithful, loyal.
Well, this
friend.
person was a childhood friend.
Yeah.
So it was very, very painful. And growing up in the family that I grew up in, I wanted to fix it. I wanted to see, well, what did I do? And I had to look at myself, and I had to accept what she was telling me of how I had hurt her. And I had to give her boundaries, and I had to step away from the relationship, which was really, 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 really hard. I can say now, after time has gone by and we've had some chances here and there over the years to get back together, that our friendship has kind of come back together. And so I feel really blessed about that. And as we've gotten older, and I've apologized again, because she was a dear friend, but it was hard. It was hard. And how was I supposed to behave as a Christian? How was I supposed to continue to love? And aren't I supposed to be able to fix it? I had another little incident at work with someone who was a friend of mine who there was a rumor that came up about me that was not true. And it was going around.
I'm glad that one.
It was not true. I was going around to everybody at work, and the person that was saying something about me was a friend of mine, was a dear friend of mine. And
Heather, can I just mention,
yes.
Some people think they're not gossiping if what they're telling is true.
Right.
Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah,
Some
sure.
people think it's not her. Oh, I just told the truth. Well, pin a rose on your nose. You should. Right. That was not your truth to tell. And it was perhaps mean, and you were told not to do that by Jesus, by the way.
So this was really very upsetting. So I was going around to everybody at work and asking them, have you heard this about me? I just need to tell you that is not true. I was like going to every person. Anyway, so I finally went, I said, who's saying this? I finally went directly to the person, and she's like, she felt sick to her stomach. Her husband had told her not to come to me, wait till I come to her, and all of this stuff. And we were able to work it out, but at one point I had to kind of just let the hurt of all that go. And we're still friends, and we've remained friends. And sometimes it's good to be able to just let things go. And Pastor, I know that you must have had a lot of difficult conversations and difficult situations in your relationships as a pastor. Just being a pastor's daughter, and my dad apologized. I can't even tell you how many times, over and over. Oh my goodness. If people could have a little video camera at my house of what my dad went through when he knew that he hurt somebody, or if some relationship wasn't working out, it was devastating. And he did a lot of apologizing, which was great for me to witness and see.
Because you learned from him.
Yes, I did.
Well, I think being a pastor, difficult conversations have a way of coming to you, invited or uninvited. So you're right on that one. And I don't like difficult confrontations by nature. I'm glad my theme next week is be a peacemaker. But that doesn't mean that's easy.
Oh, you chose the peacemaker one.
I have so little integrity to choose the ones that I feel like talking on and give the hard ones to other people. But the difficult conversations, I asked Denise about this, like how do you get past something that's such a difficult patch in the road of your relationship? And the two things she said were, hi, girls, and welcome. Can we turn the camera? No, I'm just kidding. So one of the things that helps, I think,
Are you trying to have another difficult conversation, Duff?
Let's have if you guys could stay after for just a few moments. And we have a few confrontational words to share. But we're glad you're here, but you're not late. You're right on time. It's just after we started by 23. So, no, listen, Denise felt that acceptance is absolutely critically important if there's hope. But how do you accept something that feels unacceptable? Or someone that is acting in an unacceptable way?
Yes.
And in Christianity, we have this cliche, love the sinner, hate the sin. Have you heard that one? C.S. Lewis said that never made sense to him until one day he got to thinking and he said to himself, there's one person, this isn't that astounding. There's one person I can think of I've been doing this with for years. And of course he was speaking about himself. Like I do a good job of loving myself. Yes, Clive, you keep on loving yourself, even though there's some despicable things about you that you find totally unacceptable and makes you so mad at Clive, but somehow you keep loving. So that's, I think, fits with the second great commandment, that we love others the way we love ourselves. We look out for their best interest. We cut them slack when it's necessary. We accept who they are and stop expecting them to be someone different than who they are. And we give them a lot of grace, just like God has to give us lots of grace. So the acceptance thing helps. And I think the other part, you mentioned forgiveness. That's huge. And a lack of judgment, like, can I put the person above what they're saying right now or above how they're behaving? And is the relationship big enough and worth saving? I think that's my final thought, that, we as Christians are connected to the kingdom, to God, to God's kingdom, which is so much bigger than us. And if we can remember, I'm tapped into something so much bigger than me. And the world doesn't revolve around me. It's not all about me. Let's see what God can do in this relationship if I give space, if I hold space for God to come and work. Does that make
That's
any...
fantastic. I love it.
But boy, please pray for me that I can practice acceptance and unconditional love.
Yeah, please pray for me, please pray for all of us that we can,
I'm so
we can
thankful, Heather.
accept and have tolerance. I love that Denise said acceptance and tolerance.
Yes. Amen.
My friend Paul has the word tonight. I appreciate him so much for his willing heart. He's got a beautiful
Amen.
heart for Jesus and a willing heart, and he always has great things to share. So
Paul teaches our little girl lyric, and it makes me so happy that she knows a Christian man like Paul.
yes.
It's going to help her so much. Thank you, Paul.
All right. Well, thank you. So this is, I think, my third time doing this. So bear with me. I'll say I'm off to a better start than I was a couple weeks ago. We did a reading over here, and right when I walked up to the stage, I put my glasses on, they broke. So they did not break yet tonight, so I'm feeling pretty good about things. I think this is going to be good. I want to thank and acknowledge my wife for saying prayer. That's not her favorite thing to do by any means. But she did it for me, I think. And if there's anybody who should be up here talking about relationships, it should be her. She knows more about the relationships in general than I think anybody I've ever met. So I am by no means really the one that should be up here. But thank you for doing that. And then Heather, thank you for everything you do in your coordination. And that was perfect. And it's really cool how things come together. And that whole idea around relationships, difficult relationships, and what we'll talk about more is how do you have conversations with people that are different than you, that see things different. But let's start with some prayer, please. Lord, I'm not qualified to speak your word, you know that, but please speak through me today. I pray that your words can bring some healing, some peace, some help to somebody today, Lord, that it can bring some peace, healing, maybe to a relationship that needs it. And I just ask that you speak through me tonight, Lord. I thank you, and I ask these things in your name. Amen. Okay, so we are talking about relationships, and I think if you were here last week, you know that the current series is about building healthy relationships. And I think the key letters in that are the ing in building, because you have to maintain these relationships. You can't set it and forget it. It takes work. It's hard, right? Any sort of relationship is really hard. It's always a work in progress. So I think, Duff, last week you talked, and it was touched on here a moment ago, about Matthew 27, 39, right? The golden rule, right? Love others, right, as you love yourself. the golden rule, right? Later, Jesus would talk about and take it actually one step further with what Andy Stanley calls the platinum rule. John, let's see if I can get this to work here. Let's see. Okay. I'm trying to get to John. Okay. Anyway, so the John 15, 12, 13, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Now he's taking it even a step further, right? To lay down one's life for one's friends. So the good news is, as Jesus said this, he didn't kind of just drop the mic and leave us and not give us help, right? He actually gave us a lot of help and modeled it out. He gave us, obviously, the Bible. Jesus knew relationships are not easy. He understood how complex they are. He gave us the guide, the Bible, right, to help with that. He also modeled it out in how he lived. I mean, he truly loved the unlovable. And there's different ways to think about the unlovable, but I can think, at least from society's standpoint back then, Matthew, a tax collector, somebody, probably the most despised person and position, maybe other than the Roman soldier at those times. Yet Jesus said, "Follow me," and loved Matthew, loved the unlovable, if you will. He was willing to die for us, the ultimate show of love. Jesus never hesitated to enter into the messiness of sinners as a faithful friend who loves at all times, no matter what they did to him, right up until his very last breath. So we need to learn and listen to Jesus and follow him into these messy friendships. Let's see if I can try to get to. Here we go. Okay, Proverbs 17:17. I love how it puts it. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. A true friend moves closer, right, when times get harder, and never leaves or forsakes a friend, even when the trial lasts a lifetime. Relationships, as Duff said, relationships are fun when things are going well, right? When there's no conflict. Times are good, it's easy. But when the going gets tough, we all tend to, one degree or another, want to run. It's easy to be nice, right? You love those that agree with us, see things the way we see them, those that think like us even, more so than ever these days. Corinthians 13, 4-7, verses I think we all know really well. Love means caring, helping, listening, covering an offense, being patient, never envying or boasting. This kind of love and friendship, this sort of relationship is very difficult for us as humans. It's almost this supernatural type of love. So how can we be supernatural, to use that word? First, we must live with that strong connection to the Father, and out of that comes that deep compassion, empathy. We'll talk more about that in a moment for people, but it starts with that connection to the Father. And I would argue that you can't truly have the sort of healthy relationships, that deep connection to others without that connection to God. That's where it starts. It starts with that faithfulness. And we will not have that relationship, especially that platinum rule relationship, without that connection to God. So we need to learn faithfulness in order to be faithful in our relationships. And we simply must trust that Jesus knew what he was doing when he modeled this sort of life for us and these sort of relationships. We must trust that the Holy Spirit will help. Let's see, I'm trying to find Galatians. It's gone. But Galatians talks about 5:22. It talks about, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. So a strong connection to God is the only way which will get this deep compassion for people, to be empathetic. Put it another way, and Andy Stanley talks about this, our horizontal relationships, our relationships with each other will not be all they can be until we follow Jesus' direction and we have that vertical connection with him. Horizontal will not be okay if we don't start with that vertical connection, and it needs to be strong. I'd argue that you need this connection perspective to approach people with grace and truth. You guys touched on that. It's amazing, again, how it all came together. Jesus did not condone people's sins, but he didn't run from them either, right? It was grace and truth. And so few of these kind of relationships exist today, the kind in Proverbs 17:17, even within our churches, unfortunately, right? People enjoy casual relationships. They enjoy the fun of it, but when things get tough or difficult, many times people will run. They'll pull back from relationships. And that's where we need to lean in and lean into those messy relationships. Begin to see each other through the lens of Jesus Christ.
the lens of that platinum rule that Jesus gave to us. So for the rest of the time today, what I want to try and do is get a little practical. I'm very practical in nature. What does it mean, and how do we have relationships with those that are different than us, maybe being difficult for one way or another? And it goes both ways, right? And different can mean very many things these days, different views, parenting style, money, politics. That's a big one for sure. Background, race, etc. There's all sorts of differences, right? And the reality is, especially these days, we're so polarized in many ways, and it makes me sad. And I can tell you that I experienced this personally, where I feel I have a younger brother who we see things very differently in many ways, and it's difficult to have a relationship with him right now. And a key to relationship, right, is time. I remember before we had children, a wise father told me that, kids spell love Time, right? If you don't spend time, you don't have that relationship. But I find it difficult, frankly, to spend time with my brother again, because we're just so different in so many ways right now. And it really is a bother to me. And I know, he feels the same way about me, frankly. But that's something that we're going to work together through, and hopefully, if you're in that sort of situation too, maybe some of the things I speak of today might help with that sort of difficult conversation, because again, it's about time to develop that relationship with people, and trying to do that with people that see so different than us, right? So how do we disagree without dividing the church, without dividing our families, your workplace? Right, because there's so many differences these days, right? So again, I've got a few thoughts on specific actions we can take, and it's also amazing sometimes how timing works out, because I did a Bible study not too long ago, and it talked about this, so I pulled a lot of information from that, and then also some from Andy Stanley, who I mentioned earlier, who's one of my favorite pastors. If you've never listened to Andy, check him out. He's a man of God, a wise man, a practical man that I think will make your lives better. Okay, so how do we go about doing that? How do we go about having a relationship and being able to have meaningful, healthy conversations with people that we see different? So it begins with how we view others. So one of the most complex truths of communication is how our perception of people, right, and events determines our reality. Perception is very, very powerful. And once created, that perception is really difficult to change. So, and our perception is deeply influenced by stereotypes, right? And what we think. And those stereotypes are really predictive judgments we make of an entire group of people. And sometimes they're not inherently false, if you will, but in today's culture, they often cast people in a certain way, in a negative light, more than not. And those stereotypes can be fostered by meeting a person from a particular group and then expecting all those people to have the same convictions or beliefs, or they can be developed what we read about, see on the internet, see on the news, etc. So we'll do a little test here. Now, please don't yell out the first word that comes to mind, so just think it to yourself, but a little test here. So as I say this word, what comes to mind for you? Feminist, Trump supporter, Black Lives Matter, Republican, evangelical, Biden supporter, anti-mask advocate, right? It's when I read through that, I was surprised how quickly a word came to mind for many of those perceptions, right? Those stereotypes that have built up. So what prompted that perception? It was based on our experience, right? Based on what we've seen, based on what we've heard, based on what we experienced, you get that perception. Now, the scriptures, when you look at those, let me see if I can find the one I want here. No, I'm going to go back. There it is. I think that's it. Proverbs 18:13. I think this definitely advocates a different stance. It's a stance of listening, where a person gets to define who they are and what they believe. So put another way, maybe, answering before listening is both stupid and rude, right? We need to listen more. So again, first step there is think about those perceptions, and we need to address those perceptions if you're looking to have that healthy conversation with somebody and you want to build and maintain that relationship. So then how do we get to correct those impressions? How often do we intentionally allow somebody a chance to directly address our stereotypes of them? I would say that's something I'm not sure I've ever done, at least in the way it's envisioned here. So again, Proverbs 17 reminds us that in a dispute, we're often swayed by a particular opinion until somebody comes forward and is able to cross-examine us, right? Proverbs 18:17. So that crucial step in addressing the negative stereotypes is giving people the opportunity to cross-examine or challenge our impressions. It's called perception checking. So we tell somebody the impression we have, and we give them an opportunity to respond and allow them to address that perception. Again, that's probably a very difficult conversation, but something that's very important to address those perceptions. And again, I'm not sure I've ever done it quite like this, but think about how many misunderstandings can be avoided by informing others of our perception of them and then asking them to clarify, to address it. Right? I think that could be pretty powerful in a conversation. Then after acknowledging that and addressing our perceptions, next we need to cultivate curiosity. Right? Curiosity, I like that word. So if someone else's convictions don't make sense to us, it's probably because we don't understand their backstory or the conviction itself, right? So our first goal is then to understand. Try to understand them. And what that means is you need to be, let's see if I can find our pictures up here. We had a chimp and a rhino somewhere. I'm not sure where they went. Okay, you're going to find it. Okay, so that means you need to be a chimp, not a rhino, okay? So say what? All right, here we go. So rhinoceroses, and I learned this is interesting. They're notoriously, and you might know this stuff with your where you grew up and your background, but they're notoriously short-sighted. It said they cannot tell a difference between a tree and a human from 50 feet away, which explains their aggressive behavior, right? They don't see very well. And if they don't recognize it, guess what? They ram it. They smash into it, right? And that's hard on the trees. That's hard on humans. That's frankly hard on the rhinoceros. That's just not a good situation, right? Then you have chimps. Chimps are different. Oh, so it's different there. Okay, got it. Okay. Chimp doesn't show. You see, I didn't realize that makes perfect sense. Okay, so we got the chimp up. So when chimps see something they don't recognize, they go investigate. They're not like the rhinoceros. They're not just going to ram it, right? They're going to go investigate. They pick it up, they prod it, they play with it, they stick it on their head. They're curious. They decide if it's for them. What is it? And if it's not of interest, they put it down and move on. But they're curious, right? So if your brother or sister in Christ has that personal conviction you don't understand, be curious, investigate it. Don't be the rhino. Don't ram them. Be the chimp, right? Be curious. Ask questions. Dig. Try to understand. Be the chimp. So after that, we need to hear the feelings, not just the facts. So you've got your facts, but then you've got the feelings and really trying to understand that person. So I mentioned empathy earlier, which is a critical personality trait. And authentic empathy is really essential to navigating conflict. So we've got James 1:19 that talks about that. And it begins really with being willing to hold one's tongue, again, and let others speak. Be willing to listen. James, I think, puts it as being quick to listen and slow to speak. That's such a powerful verse. But merely listening is not enough. We need to listen with a genuine desire to understand, right? Really key in eye contact and really be interested in understanding the feelings and not just the facts. So we need to patiently set aside those rebuttals, those challenges, those objections that's already in your mind as you're listening to somebody and you're not really listening because you know what you want to say and how you're going to argue with them. You need to put that to the side. You need to really listen and give that person that chance to talk and press such things out of our mind and replace them with that overwhelming desire to truly understand what our conversation partner is saying and how he or she feels about an issue. So again, it's not just the facts, it's those feelings. Maybe put another way, we need to listen until we can state what the other person both feels and thinks, because that feeling part is so important. After that, we need to value our differences. We're all different, and that's not a bad thing. It's an inherent part of any group, of any church, a family, or workplace. We're all different. We're designed that way, and these differences can absolutely serve a positive purpose and should be valued and respected. They can be a blessing. These different convictions, when they're zealously expressed and passionately pursued, get things done. That's how people get things done. You need to have that sort of passion and drive, and the differences, again, help with that. But a big part of valuing the differences is trust, and that's where it really starts with believing the best in a person. If we can start with that belief that the person we're talking with shares our concern or belief that what we want to do is really best, maybe best for another person in particular, then we're at a good starting point for that conversation, right? We have this key choice in life, in relationships, where you can either believe the best in a person or you can assume the worst. Believe the best or you can assume the worst. And this could be, frankly, and I'll talk about this study in a moment, the single most important decision you have in a relationship, right? Something happens. Andy Stanley talks about it, about gaps and expectations, and I'll look at that, talk more about that in a moment. But we can see a little bit of this in the Bible in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, back to 1 Corinthians 13, if we can find that. The love chapter, we probably all read it 100 times, but maybe a little bit different this time, or a little different emphasis perhaps. So 13:4. Love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Verse 7. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. That's that always trust. The Message puts it a little bit different. The Message says always looks for the best. So again, I know I've read those verses many times, but I've never really keyed into the trust or assuming the best of somebody. So what does it mean to always trust? It means you look for the best in person, because we know in the individual, we know in life there's always these gaps, right, between your expectations and reality and what really happens. And what are you going to do? How are you going to fill that gap in? That's that decision you have, that choice you have. You going to think the best, or are you going to assume the worst? How are you going to fill that gap? Your wife's late again. Your husband, missed something. Whatever the case is, how are you going to fill that gap? Right? You want to believe the best, or you want to assume the worst? And there's an interesting study done. Let's see. Back in 2005, there was a gentleman called Marcus Buckingham, and he wrote a book called "One Thing You Need to Know." And it was more a book about. It wasn't necessarily a Christian book. It was more a book about leadership and management, and was really looking for this common denominator about relationships, happy relationships, and in particular, happy couples. So they looked at this 20-year survey that was done of happy couples around the world. And they talked to these happy couples, and these were couples that have been married, I forget the number, 20 plus years, and who still genuinely loved each other, loved spending time with each other. What was the common denominator there? How could these couples still be happy after all this time? So they asked a bunch of questions trying to find this common denominator. And going in, it was interesting because the survey assumed that over the time, the couples would actually downgrade their expectations of their partners. They'd get more realistic. The honeymoon phase would be over, right? The things you once thought were cute were not so cute anymore. So, like for me, you guys remember Price Club? It was the old Costco, right? So to me, it's still Price Club. I call it Price Club, and drives Tiffany crazy. She used to think it was kind of cute, I think, that I'd call it Price Club and not Costco, but now she's like, if you call it Price Club one more time, I might kill you. And I do that with some other things too. And I might do it on purpose sometimes, but sometimes I don't. But anyway, once cute, now just annoying, right? But what came out of the survey was truly fascinating was that these happy couples, they viewed their partner higher than themselves. So they were asked different questions. They rated themselves, and they rated their partners on different attributes. And that in those happy couples, each partner consistently gave the other partner a higher score, rated them higher, saw them at a higher level, if you will. And that was the positive view that kept those couples happy, right? And that was the secret sauce. That was the common denominator in those relationships. It was all about filling the gap in with always assuming the best, thinking the best of somebody. Do not assume the worst. And that was, it was quite simple. What came out of that survey was find the most generous explanation for others' behavior and believe it. And I understand there's certain things when there's trends and there's bigger issues, but in general, day in, day out, just find that most generous explanation for the other's behavior and believe it, and fill that gap in that way. I think it's a huge step towards understanding our differences, right, and trying to get on a common page. Next, we need to share stories, not just conclusions, because sharing our stories and not just our conclusions always makes the discussion better. So we're trying to have that discussion. We're trying to spend time with each other. It makes it easier to share because you're not speaking as an expert or a philosopher or this know-it-all, right? You're simply telling your story, right? It's much easier to relate. And it often helps then people become more sensitive to one another because it helps you understand better. You've heard that saying, don't judge anybody until you've walked a mile in their shoes, right? That kind of gets at this. You got to understand their journey, understand their expectations, their experiences, should I say. And again, give them the benefit of the doubt. I heard this story one time, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but there was a man and his 3 kids, and they were in the subway in New York City. They got onto the subway car, and the kids are just out of control, running around, screaming, jumping off the chairs, swinging on the things you hold on when you're standing, and the dad is kind of oblivious to it all. He's sitting there, kind of hands on his head, and everybody else is like, whose kids are these? What is going on here? These kids are out of control. Somebody needs to tell the dad. So finally, somebody goes over to him and says, "Excuse me, your children are out of control." He looks up. He says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that. I was thinking about something else. We just left the hospital where their mom had died." All right, can you imagine that? I mean, it's back to assume the best, walk a mile in other people's shoes. You just never know what else is going on in somebody's life, what their experiences are, right? Simple way, or good way, perhaps, to try and get at that story or that conversation is, instead of, again, kind of preaching, telling, you say, "Hey, let me tell you what I think about this and why I think it. Why I think it." Kind of clumsy but powerful, right? That just opens up that conversation instead of, again, telling somebody, kind of shutting down the conversation. Here's what I think. It opens up the conversation. So maybe something really, really practical there to help. Lastly here, we need to remember that words have real power, and they can hurt or heal. And there's so many verses in the Bible that talk about this. And really the other super important part of any conversation is embracing the reality that the words we speak matter. And again, they can hurt or heal. That tongue is really the most powerful muscle in the body. And one of the key mistakes we make in communication is thinking it only exists on one level. So it's either our content, our arguments, our words, and that's it. But if you look at Ephesians 4:15, it talks about, and Paul acknowledges when he exhorts us to speaking the truth. So that's the content piece, right? Speaking the truth in love, the relation part. So you've got your content and you've got your relationship part. So speak the truth, but speak it in love, right? We tell our kids all the time, it's not just what you say, but it's how you say it. And sometimes it's the how you say that's even more important than even what you're saying, right? So again, speaking in truth in love. And I think, sadly, all of us at times kind of focus more on that content piece and ignore kind of the relational implications of what we're saying, and we don't pay enough attention to that. And again, there's so many proverbs that talk about the potentially devastating power of words. Proverbs 12:18 talks about how reckless words are presented as a piercing sword. Wow. Proverbs 25:15. A word spoken in the wrong way can break a bone. Right. Proverbs 15:4. A person's spirit is easily crushed by a deceitful tongue. Proverbs 16:27. In plotting evil, a scoundrel's speech is like a scorching fire. And there's plenty others like that. Hopefully you guys get the point. Now, the good news is the same writers in Proverbs warned us that of the negative implications and impacts of using words, also talk about their positive influence. Gentle words bring health to a recipient. I think that's Proverbs 15:4. Much like a bubbling brook quenches a person's thirst. Proverbs 18:4. Kind words are compared to honey that is sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Proverbs 16:24. So before you start any conversation, right, ask yourself, do you seek to hurt or heal as you discuss your differences? Right? Are you seeking to hurt or are you seeking to heal? And I think if you do these things, these practical steps that I know I'm going to work on more, this is going to help us build and maintain those healthy relationships. This is how you have healthy conversations. Again, if you can't have conversations, you can't spend time with people, you're not going to be able to develop those relationships. This is how we model God's faithfulness, I would argue. This is how we can try to live to that platinum rule of loving others as God loved us. And it's about how, again, we use those horizontal relationships which with each other give glory to God, who with our most important vertical relationship. It's how we can learn that faithfulness to be faithful in how we treat others. And simply put, we need to see others, treat others like Jesus taught us, right? We want others to know us by our love. And we'll listen to a great song here in a moment about that. But let me close with prayer. Lord, please just give us eyes to see others as you do, Lord. Give us a heart for those that we have differences with. Help us to come together, Lord, as a church, families, workplaces, as a country, Lord, more so than ever. Lord, help us that our deepest convictions, they'll always be shared with both blending that truth and that love. And help us just not to forget about that love part, Lord. And please help us just to walk in your spirit every day, but particularly as we have difficult conversations and as we work on building those relationships, Lord, and maintaining healthy relationships. We ask these things in your name. Amen. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Chandler.
Brothers, let us come together, walking in the Spirit. There's much to be done. We will come reaching out from our comforts, and they will know us by our love. Sisters, we were made for kindness. We can pierce the darkness as He shines through us. We will come reaching with a song of healing, and they will know us by our love. The time is now. Come, church, arise. Love with His hands, see with His eyes. Bind it around you, let it never leave you. And they will know us by our love. Children, you are hope for justice. Stand firm in the truth now. Set your hearts above. You will love with his hands, see with his eyes, bind it around you, let it never leave you. And they will know us by our love. The time is now. Come, church, arise. Love with his hands, see with his eyes, bind it around you, let it never leave you. And they will know us by our love. Amen. Thank you so much, Paul. It was so nice to be with everyone this afternoon as we get to learn more about relationships. Great practical stuff, Paul. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who has joined us online. Don't forget, you can go to foothillsaz.org to just get connected with everything that's happening here at Foothills. I'll Givelify, if you don't have the Givelify app and you need a place to give your tithes and offerings, that is a great little app. I use it all the time to give here at Foothills, which is great. So until next week, Wednesday night for Wednesday Roundtable, or next week at 11 o'clock, have a great week. Have a great rest of your evening. See you soon.